All right, let's just jump right in. What if I told you that everything you think is real and solid, I mean the chair you're on, the device in your hands, even your own body, isn't actually made of stuff at all? We're about to dive into this really radical idea called single point theory, and it suggests that our entire universe is just the result of one single, incredibly simple process that's updating at a speed we can barely even imagine.
So let's kick things off with maybe the most fundamental question you can ask. Is reality actually made of things? I mean, we just assume it is, right? We talk about particles and planets and people, but what if all of that is just an illusion, a really convincing side effect of something way deeper going on?
To get our heads around this, let's use a good old analogy. Think about an old-school tube television, a CRT. At any given moment, there wasn't a full picture on that screen. Nope. It was a single electron beam, just one dot of light, scanning across the glass so incredibly fast that our eyes were fooled into seeing a solid, stable image. Well, single-point theory says our universe basically works the same way. There's one process instance that's updating reality at the fastest rate possible, creating this grand illusion of a solid, persistent world.
Okay, so you're probably wondering, how could one simple process possibly create all the complexity we see in our universe? Well, the theory says it's because this whole reality, as complex as it seems, is actually governed by a set of incredibly simple rules.
In this entire model, there's really only one thing you can say truly exists, and that's the single process instance. And let's be clear, it's not a particle, it's not a little bit of energy. A better way to think of it is like a bookkeeping device. It just has a location relative to other locations and a direction it's tending to turn. That's it. No mass, no charge, nothing. Everything else we see has to emerge from just that.
Now here's the crucial part. How does a system like this avoid just getting stuck in a simple, boring, repeating loop? The secret sauce is something called the uniqueness principle. The rotation is nudged by an irrational number, specifically the golden ratio. And because it's irrational, the path of this process instance never ever perfectly repeats itself. It can't. Every single moment is totally unique. And that's what forces the universe to constantly explore new configurations, allowing for genuine evolution and complexity to appear.
Which, of course, brings us to the next big question. If there aren't any fundamental things, then how in the world do particles, atoms, and all the stuff we see around us actually show up? This really does require a bit of a mental shift. Picture a whirlpool in a river. It looks like an object, right? But you can't just reach in and pick it up. It's not a thing, it's a stable pattern made of moving water. Single-point theory says an electron is exactly like that. It's not a tiny little ball, but a stable, self-reinforcing pattern, a resonance in that underlying process. So in this view, matter isn't a substance, it's a persistence. It's a pattern that lasts.
So this persistence happens through a mechanism called resonance closure. Now remember, because that irrational number, the path never perfectly repeats, but it can get really close to where it's been before. And when it does this over and over again after a certain number of steps, it starts to reinforce itself. It creates a stable loop, a little whirlpool in the fabric of reality, and that's how seemingly solid stuff can emerge from nothing but pure motion.
But here's where it gets really interesting. It turns out that not just any old loop will work. For a pattern to be stable in our universe, it seems to need a very specific number of steps. You could almost call it a kind of magic number for reality itself. So the theory poses this exact question. What is the absolute bare minimum number of steps you need to create a stable, self-reinforcing pattern in 3 dimensions? And you know what? The logic is surprisingly simple geometry. Okay, step 1. To define a structure in our universe, you have to cover our 3 spatial dimensions. Check. Step 2, for each of those dimensions to have full rotational freedom, you need 4 phase quadrants. Think up, down, left, right. So the smallest number of steps to make a stable, fully 3D loop is just 3 dimensions times 4 phases. And that gives us the number 12. According to this theory, 12 is the fundamental building block of persistence. It is the absolute shortest resonance cycle that can create a stable, 3D thing in our universe.
So why is this number 12 such a big deal? I mean, who cares, right? Well, this is where it gets really, truly mind-blowing. Because this simple rule isn't just some neat theoretical idea. It leads directly to the big payoff, a geometric origin for one of the absolute most mysterious numbers in all of physics.
Yeah, that's right. This 12-step cycle isn't just an abstract concept.
The theory claims it is the direct source code for a fundamental constant of nature, a number that physicists have been measuring for 100 years without ever knowing where it came from.
Okay, here's the calculation. It's shockingly simple. A 12-cycle system has a total of 12 squared or 144 possible ways it can relate to itself. But, and here's the key, for an observer like you or me to exist and actually measure something, we have to lock down our own frame of reference. And that takes 7 degrees of freedom. 3 for our position, 3 for our orientation, and 1 for time. So we have to subtract the 7 states we use just to be here from the 144 total states. And 144 minus 7 is 137.
And the result of that simple math is just stunning. The inverse of the fine structure constant, one of the most important numbers in all of quantum physics, has been measured in labs to be 137.0359999. This theory gets us the integer 137 from pure geometry. And that tiny decimal part, the theory says that's just the quantization noise. A tiny bit of self-interference from the 12-cycle pattern itself. It's not some random magic number. It's literally the efficiency rating of the universe's own operating system.
And from there, the whole theory just reframes the 4 fundamental forces. They're not forces anymore, they're just different behaviors of this resonance network. Gravity? That's just a statistical tendency to drift toward denser, more persistent patterns. Electromagnetism is the, let's call it, pressure, between the phases of 2 different loops. The strong force is a lock that holds dense patterns together, and the weak force is just the system finding a more efficient state for an unstable pattern.
So, where does that leave us? What does all of this actually mean? Well, it represents a pretty profound shift in how we think about reality itself.
You can really boil the whole theory down to this one sentence. Reality isn't some giant stage with a bunch of actors on it. It's a self-organizing network where stable patterns emerge based on what's most efficient locally, and we just happen to interpret those patterns as things like particles, forces, and even space-time.
So in the end, we don't live in a universe of stuff at all. We live inside a self-conserving agreement, a pattern of resonance. And maybe the most beautiful idea to come out of this is that matter isn't some fundamental substance. Matter is simply what happens when the process succeeds in remembering itself.
Which leaves us with one final and pretty provocative question. If the entire universe is just a stable, self-remembering pattern, a resonant agreement, then what on earth does that make us?